Good evening, one and all. You are here at the 41st meeting of the No Name Cinema Society, our little society where we talk about films new and old. Tonight we're going to talk about Atomic Blonde. It is Thursday, August the 3rd, 2017. And hi, my name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts for the evening. Thanks for joining us. And if you've been watching the show, you know that I've just spent the last couple weeks in LA. We did a show on Monday night where I was in LA, and I came back here last night, and I'm now in New York, in Astoria. You may recognize this particular backdrop from shows like our 21st episode and our 22nd episode. I think maybe our 39th episode. I can't remember. No, not their 39th. I don't remember. But regardless, that's what's going on. I am going back to LA at the end of August, and then back here to New York in September. So it's jet setting all around, but that's what makes life a little fun, I would hope. So let me introduce my cohorts here, my co-hosts. First, my naive French spy with some lesbian leanings, Davie Joe.
Ouch. That hurts. That hurts.
that hurts. Well, at least you're not the potential untrustworthy double agent that is J Money.
I see. I figured you would put me as KGB, but I'll take either or. That's fine.
So J Money, what are you drinking tonight?
Tonight I'll be sticking to some Founders. Founders beer.
Good. So I bought this as special. It is PBR, and it was $2. This whole thing was $2. So I bought a bunch of them. So I'll be stocked up for both this show and when I come back here in September.
Oh, that's the important thing.
Cheers to you both.
Yep.
And Davey, you've got tequila tonight?
I didn't even bring my water over. It's over there. Ugh.
Drunk Davie, killing it in Seattle. Guys, as I mentioned, today is Thursday, August 3rd, and some really fun things have happened in history on August 3rd. Like, for example, in 1934, Adolf Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President and declared himself Führer. That was a big deal back in 1934. Yeah, J Money remembers it well.
Yeah, I have it on my calendar.
August 3rd.
August 3rd.
In August 3rd, 1989, Davey, the Cincinnati Reds sent 20 men to bat in a single inning, the first inning of a game, where they had 16 hits and scored 14 runs.
Wow, a lot.
National League record. That's a lot in one inning. And in 1992, a movie that we've talked about from time to time, Unforgiven was released on this day in 1992. And incidentally, it opens tomorrow in New York at Film Forum, August 4th, celebrating its 25th anniversary, and it's playing for a week at Film Forum. Those of you that watch the show remember that it come up in a couple different brackets, famously losing in the Westerns bracket as a #1 seed to the Missouri Breaks, beating it. I cut to Davie Joe right in time for that kind of reaction. I love that. So Unforgiven celebrating its 25th anniversary today. And speaking of birthdays, it is also the 91st birthday of Mr. Tony Bennett, ladies and gentlemen. 91 years old today, August the 3rd.
I hope you're not jinxing him right now.
I hope so too. Is he in your death pool? Is that what you're getting at?
I'm just saying the reality of what we're doing right now. Yeah, you might be jinxing him.
Davie Joe, you're a jazz guy. How do you feel about Mr. Tony Bennett?
Oh man, he's awesome.
He is awesome. Okay. He's one-word man, our Davie Joe. Now that that's out of the way, let me tell you about the schedule for our 41st set of episodes. And here it is right now. Obviously, right now, we're here to talk about Atomic Blonde, which opened this past Friday, starring Charlize Theron, and we'll get into that shortly. On Sunday, August the 6th, in just 3 days, note 3 days, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do our Indie Spotlight, The Sound of My Voice, spotlighting films from 2012 this year, indies from 2012. We're talking about a big one on August 10th. Thursday, August 10th, 1 week from tonight, we're going to break down Casablanca. That should be an interesting discussion. And our sound off is going to be 5 days after that, which I believe is a Tuesday, August 15th, our 25th sound off, which I'm going to talk a little bit about my trip to TCM Fest this year. We're going to have a second run film that came from TCM Fest, and the three of us are going to reveal our top 5 films that we reviewed on the show in 2016. That's going to happen on August 15th. Are you guys excited to kick off our 41st set of episodes?
Hell yeah.
Davey, you sound less excited.
I'm pumped.
What would any show be without starting with a summary? Ladies and gentlemen, super hot, super spy Lorraine is sent to Berlin circa 1989 by her British superiors to recover a stolen list that reveals the identities of spies from all over the globe, including that of everyone's enemy, the elusive double agent known as J-Money. I mean, Satchel. Lorraine has to navigate untrustworthy Americans, Russians, French, Germans, and even her own countrymen in a powder keg of a city about to explode, fed up with its own political divide. Summary thoughts?
Well done.
You lost me when you said my name. I just wandered off.
It's funny. Most people tune up when they hear their name, but you just like drift away.
I went to my happy place away from here.
Yeah. Our happy place is also when you're away from here. So we have that in common.
I agree.
Ouch.
All right, it's time for opening thoughts on Atomic Blonde. Davey, where does this go in the Davey scale?
So sticking with the one-word theme, the word I picked out for this movie is bananas.
Bananas. I don't know where to put that. I don't know where to put that on the Davey scale.
We're gonna have to amend the Davey scale for bananas.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know how to adjust to that. Too many curveballs.
Even Joe. Wouldn't that not have more sense for Planet of the Apes? For War of the Planet of the Apes?
Yeah, that would have made more sense.
You would think, but no. This one was
So, J-Money, so far I have bananas.
I can't think of a fruit that would sum up my opinion, so I guess I'm going to move to an actual sentence on this one. I think it's a Cold War drama that left me a little lukewarm.
It seems like you may have liked it the least, because I feel like it's interesting going into the movie. I thought it was unusual and not a good sign when a movie seems to hinge its entire promotional campaign on a single sequence in the movie. The sequence is worthy, but the movie is too. I think it's enjoyable, slick, and I was entertained by it. And I think one of the main reasons behind that was the direction of former stuntman turned director David Leitch, Leitch. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but let's go with it for now. If you guys know different, feel free to correct me, and not that you've held back in the past. David Leitch was a uncredited director on John Wick, and you can sort of see some of the similarities there. But where John Wick was pure awful, this one I felt like was much stronger, particularly from a directorial point of view. I was really struck by the design of the film. Thought it was a detailed vision, probably dictated by the graphic novel. How do you guys feel about the overall design and choices made as far as design is concerned of Atomic Blonde?
I mean, it's super slick and it's ultra stylized. I'm glad you liked it. I didn't know if you were going to.
The amount of choices that went into each set piece, I appreciate that, because sometimes directors, especially first timers maybe, are a little lazy when it comes to the level of detail that they'll go to in a scene. This film, everything is there. Even in quick cut action scenes, the mise en scène is very rich. J-Money, you didn't talk about the design at all.
Well, it's funny because I'll echo what David Joe just said. I thought that you were honestly going to hate this film for pretty much those reasons. I thought that you would find it too overbearingly stylistic, and I thought you would find it too slick, frankly. Because I do agree with what you just said. Every scene has a large amount of detail involved in how they visually construct it, but also how they they work around it, how the actors themselves work around it. So I found that fascinating. I mean, that's one of the things I like about this film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have some quibbles that are going to come up, but I mean, I feel like they established the tone and the style very early and were consistent throughout. That's all that I asked for. I mean, I don't mind stylization as long as it's consistent, within the world of the film.
But I feel like in general, you've been critical of things that are heavily stylized when we've talked about certain movies.
If it's style over substance, but I mean, I didn't think this film lacked substance. I did want to talk about the design maybe a little more thoroughly. That's the thing that stands out the most. And it's funny, one thing that I want to mention now that we're talking about design is something we don't talk about very often on the show, an element, and I don't think this film will get recognized for it, even though it is a period piece, because period pieces normally get recognized in the Oscars when it comes to costume design. But I mean, I think the costume design in this film was particularly excellent. Again, the graphic novel might have played a big role in this. Not only was the outfits period, but also they worked within the style, how it meshed with the art direction and the production design, all within the same color palette, Davey Joe. And also they were functional from an action point of view, and they worked within the action scenes. So, I mean, like, I think there was an extra layer of thinking here as far as the costume design. It's not just what looked good. And I mean, like, it's not like Charlize Theron is hot and can wear just any dress and make it look amazing. No hint of sarcasm there. Seriously, though, I think that there was great work as far as the costumes were concerned on many levels. J-Money, you were nodding your head, so I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I actually thought the costume design in this was fantastic, and partly because it's probably not going to get talked about that much, because I think in some ways it was almost subtle. I think that people would expect something to be way more out there for like an 80s inspired, sort of retro throwback. And I think that they were actually very like high fashion minded when they thought about what they were going to do for these characters in a way that I think was almost more subtle than people might have expected. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the costume choices were incredibly good. And also incredibly enjoyable to see, because they were so beautifully put together.
And a little out of the box too, I think, to some degree. I think about the James McAvoy character, and his regular outfits that he was wearing is not something maybe you would expect, but it fit his character, the way that they designed and characterized this person, Percival,
yeah.
But it was not what I would expect, but it worked so perfectly. And I really enjoy when my expectations are not met, but still works for the character. Charlize Theron got to wear a lot of hot dresses, and that worked. And her fighting outfits were great too. But all these other characters too. There was a lot of thought put into them, and really, really interesting. Well done. Davey Joe, you don't say much about costumes very often.
No, I don't generally. They were good. Liked it.
Davey Joe is pro costume. You hear it here first.
He likes costumes.
He likes costumes,
especially in the privacy of his hotel room in Seattle. So that leaves us with the next topic, and it's going to be Davey's topic. Davey, what do you think about the color palette of this film?
I mean, it just fits in with what we're saying. It's just definitely. I feel like this guy might have seen a couple Nicholas Winding Refn movies before. Definitely had that feel to it. A lot of bright.
Except, it's funny because I would suggest some of those were more contrived than this one. This one felt a little more, as stylized as it was. Each set felt plausible to some degree.
The colors weren't used for the color's sake. It didn't seem. Which I'm not.
That's sort of what I was getting at.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not criticizing Nicholas for doing that, but he definitely does do that, and I don't think that's what was going on here.
The other thing I want to talk about is the use of music in the film. And I assume you guys have seen this other film that I'm going to compare it to. But I actually feel like this is sort of the movie that Baby Driver wanted to be, in the way that it used its music. I actually thought it was a little more playful, unlike Baby Driver, which all the music was supposedly in the diegesis. This movie was playing around with both diegetic and non-diegetic, even within the same scene, almost like with a wink and a smile. I really enjoyed that, and the choices of music. And I mean, like, even at the end, when, it supposedly segues from 1989 to 1990, one of the last songs we hear is Ice Ice Baby, sort of, hammering home that change. And in a way, the change of attitude, because, it's all about the Berlin Wall falling, which we talked about in our 1990 in review show. So it's interesting that they made that choice to sort of put the stamp on the decade change and also the thawing of these Cold War tensions.
Was it actually Ice Ice Baby? I remember thinking it was going to be Ice Ice Baby, but then it ended up being Under Pressure.
I thought it was Under Pressure too. That's what I'm looking up right now.
Oh, interesting.
I remember thinking at the time,
Ice Ice Baby would have been the right choice there. Ice Ice Baby would have totally been the right choice there.
Well, but I think that was intentional. I think they were faking us out at the end with the thinking that it was going to be Ice Ice Baby.
I'm not 100% positive. I'm trying to.
I think I was thinking it was Ice Ice Baby, and I'm like, okay, that's an awesome choice, and then I just moved on in my mind.
Yeah.
So I guess I didn't wait. Wow. I hope I'm right about this. And in terms of direction, now my only major quibble in terms of direction is I did feel like they overused the super titles. And like in the beginning, it was okay, but then it got to a point where it was maybe too many times, or it was clear to me where I was in Berlin, whether it was East or West, without necessarily requiring the super titles. Gentlemen, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of things we're talking about, even including the music, for instance, to me, it all felt like it was being informed by the idea of it being a graphic novel to begin with. The musical choices, obviously, they're not in the graphic novel, but to me, they were so on the nose. It felt like it was a really strong, almost visual choice for them to include them in the film.
Are you insinuating too on the nose?
Yeah, for me, it was too on the nose a little bit. I mean, for me, it was actually kind of distracting because I'm like, of course, they're going to push this sound right now. It felt like it was a little bit too much for me. But I also, it wasn't the kind of thing that I would think was, like, I want to listen to the soundtrack now. It didn't, like, ruin anything for me. It was just, like, I felt like it was maybe a little bit too obvious.
That was going to be my next question is, do you dislike that music in general?
No, I really liked it a lot. So it's like, it was cool to hear it. I just felt like it was cut across and used enough that I was like, it felt like it was too obvious to me because it was so rooted in this very specific time period. It felt like they were trying to, like, have the greatest hits. I mean, to your point about Baby Driver, Baby Driver was a movie that I think was supposed to be inspired by music videos in general. So I feel like it, this movie had that kind of, like, music video edge to it as well. And I found that at times to be a little jarring with the things that were happening on screen. But again, I mean, we'll touch on this issue in general, but I think that everything felt very comic book-like in a certain way, or at least a graphic novel. Yeah. So it didn't, the overtitles annoyed me, but I also realized that it's part of, like, the bigger texture of this film in general.
David, Joe, anything about super titles or the music? It sounds like.
Well, I'll talk about the music. It's definitely jarring at times. The scene where it switches mid-conversation from the 80s music playing to as time goes by, which is actually playing in the restaurant. That's the kind of thing that I thought would drive you crazy, JB. Honestly, it was.
No, I mean, like, listen. What I get annoyed by is when directors are lazy with their choices. I'm all in for, like, taking every detail and that's what elevates a film to being more cinematic, and that's what this did.
So that's the one moment that really sticks out to me.
So I'm going to segue now to talk about the action scenes, which is the wheelhouse of the director David Leitch as a former stuntman. And the scene that they were pushing in the ads, almost making it seem like the movie had no other value, was the staircase scene. And for those of you who don't know, what the staircase scene amounts to essentially is a Creed-like single shot over several flights of stairs and rooms during an action scene. Now, I have some thoughts about it, but before I do, I want to see what these guys have to say. J Money, I'll let you go first.
Well, it's funny because I haven't seen Creed, so my reference point was Children of Men. To me, it was like, yeah, this is a very long continuous shot with a lot of things going on that are pretty interesting. I thought it was fantastic, especially as I realized what was happening and the way it was building. In part because, I mean, it's very satisfying action, but also because we got to see people actually get tired. We got to see people get, like, frustrated. There was a real human element to it, even though it's a very outsized kind of almost gimmicky thing to do at this point. I mean, I'm not criticizing it for that. I'm just saying, like, it's it's almost like a feather in a cap for, I think, a director to try to put that into a film. But it was very successful. I mean, it was also really successful in the way that it moved environments, and I thought it was great. Honestly, it's one of the things that really elevated the film for me in general.
Dave?
Yeah, I 2 points I want to make here. My reference point would be the Daredevil hallway fight scene.
In that fight scene, you're talking about the TV show, and I know exactly what you're talking about. But I don't think the camera moves. I think in that case, the camera stays still, and all the action happens.
I think it
it's also very impressive from a stunt point of view. But the camera work here was
absolutely. I think the thing that sets that scene apart in this film, and the thing that makes this film so neat, is all the other action scenes. I think are kind of the great marriage between editing and camera work. Just a fantastic editing and fantastic camera work. Whereas this scene, it was just incredible camera work, and the way you got to see the scene play out, just like J Money said, it was something else. Just watching it unfold.
It was highly ambitious and mostly well executed. I did feel that it, like, missed a little bit, like it was a triple instead of a home run, and here's why. And these are small details. I think that there was some contrivances within J Money's point, the gimmicky nature of it. There was some contrivances that made it possible. J Money talked about them being tired, but it did feel like there were a couple times where the bad guys in particular were lingering a little too long before they re-attacked her, because they were injured, but I mean, like, they were, like, really milking that until the camera could afford to get back around to them. That, like, I mean, like, maybe it's my onset knowledge of that kind of blocking that's making me hyper aware of that, but it did feel like a little off, the amount of time that they were taking, as if almost waiting for the camera. And also, the appearances of Spyglass initially were good, but by the end of the sequence, he was getting laughter that I don't think was intentional. At one point he's mending an injury, but he does it mostly off camera, and I do feel like it would have been a simple change to have him start the mending on camera, and really that's just about changing his position in the room. It's not, the camera doesn't need to follow him someplace. He can move to where the camera is to find the duct tape is what he used. Instead of like him disappearing for like 2 minutes, or probably less than that, maybe a minute, and then reappearing with it already done. If he had started it on camera and then finished it on camera, I think that would have not been funny to an audience. I didn't think it was funny myself, but I mean, like, I felt bad for the director in that particular scenario. It needed to end sooner. I think, within the staircase sequence, it was perfect. I mean, not perfect, but it was really, really good. And then they go through the doors. They have a hidden cut to when they go outside. I don't know if you guys noticed the hidden cut. Once they go outside, then it becomes really contrived because as far as I could tell, there was no digital help in the once for the interior section. Once they were in a car, there was a lot of digital freezing, and they were manipulating it digitally. So that was not true single shot. They were cheating a little bit. That felt a little awkward to me. Like, it didn't feel as impressive. And also the whole single shot thing ended abruptly. You feel like a shot like that needs to end with like a big moment. You know what I mean? Like, okay, now this shot is over and now we can cut away. But instead they cut away finally after 10 minutes of a single shot. They cut away finally, to a random shot. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's anticlimactic in that sense. A good example would be, there's another version of a single at the very, very end, a button, if you will, or coda. There's a similar sequence. It's hardly as long, maybe like a 1/10 as long, but it has a powerful ending. The last person that is injured is a surprise. That is a good way to get out of, that sequence. But in this case, it felt like they intended that the single shot to go all the way to the river, and then had to cut out for one reason or another. Small quibbles, but if you're going to try something ambitious, I feel like it needs to go all the way like that. So I don't know. I mean, we're running out of time, but I don't know if you guys have anything about that.
I guess I assume that with this kind of stuff in general, they're going to cheat it. I guess it doesn't really bother me ultimately,
Yeah, I mean, like, it was still fun and impressive. Like, I'm tweaking, really. Like, basically, I'm a guy in an editing room saying, I wish I could do this just a little bit better. Like, that's, it's 90% of the way there. With that said, there's all the attention is going to this one sequence when there's a ton of great other action sequences that don't require the single shot gimmick to work. Here's one of my favorite examples. Here's a clip from the apartment action scene.
Beeilig, die sind im 3. Stock. Schnell die Treppe hoch. Schnell nach oben! Komm! Ah!
leading people up to George Michael's father figure. I mean, you can't get much better than that.
Pretty much.
Yeah, no, it's great. It was a great sequence as well. And that was the first sign I was like, oh, this is actually a real meaty action movie.
Yeah.
Not just a spy movie with some action parts to it.
No, I totally agree. We're out of time. I wanted to talk about performances and plot. Do you guys have one that you'd really want to? I also wanted to maybe touch on feminism, but I really ran out of time. Do you guys have anything you want to say about any of those things?
I was just going to say, I think that a lot of people are going to be, critical of the plot. It's pretty complicated and it's a little hard to follow, but if you stick with it, it all kind of makes sense at the end, I think.
I agree with you about the complicated part of it. What I was going to say is the details of it are sort of recycled MacGuffins, as we call them. I wish there were a little more in that regard. I don't care. I mean, like, it's one of my minor quibbles. But, to Davey's point, the twists and turns and crossing and double crossing were engaging enough to hold my interest. I do enjoy that. And that, combined with the style and the action, made it a fun ride. I like that it included the civil unrest in Berlin, but it really failed to dig into that and how it affected the human experience or our characters. And I wish I'd seen a little more of that. I like that J Money's nodding. Let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we started this conversation by me saying I felt a little lukewarm, and then the rest of this conversation I've been basically raving about the stuff you've been talking about. So let me get to the stuff that I didn't like, which basically is the plot itself and the storyline. To me, I wish that this movie had kept it simpler because I think this was a simpler movie. To me, it was like, because they were trying to add on all the cliched spy stuff and trying to fool the audience by, all the double blind stuff, it felt like they were trying too hard and robbing the rest of the impact of the movie that it had by its own graces. It had beautiful design, it had beautiful action. If they'd let it be a simple action movie, I think it would have been a lot more successful. Instead, they tried to infuse it with this whole sense of Cold War espionage, and frankly, it wasn't very interesting to me. I thought it was very flat. I thought it was a really boring plotline because there just wasn't that much going on with it to make it actually interesting when they revealed what was going on. I mean, it just wasn't that big of a deal when they actually, when we figured out what the actual plot was.
I liked a lot of twists and turns, but to your point, like I actually wish that the thing that they were all after was something I hadn't seen 1,000 times before, because it's not that interesting to me. But I mean, like Hitchcock said, we don't care, and we didn't care in Pulp Fiction, because Davey's always bringing up the glowing suitcases. We generally don't care, But I mean, like, this thing about a list of agents. I mean, didn't we see that in like a Bond film 2 films ago or something?
Sure. I feel like we saw everything that they did in this movie we've seen in other places, and I don't know if that was actually intentional or not. It just felt like it was running a long list of like spy movie cliches, and it was using the backdrop and the design to make it seem more interesting and worthwhile. And honestly, they could have removed that, and I would have had just as much fun with it. I think that it almost got lumbered down by this stuff. It's
funny. I mean, I agree with you, but instead of being more simple, it sounds like I'm asking for it to be a little more complicated or a little more like I wanted. Like that time in 1989 was really a fascinating time, and I actually wanted them, and I felt like they were going to, because they used the mise en scène a lot to suggest this civil unrest. So I thought there was going to be more of a suggestion about it, or the film taking a stand about it one way or the other. And they just sort of used it as background. It didn't really infuse its way into the story as much.
Yeah, that honestly bugged the hell out of me as well. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that ruins the movie for me, but it's the kind of thing where I wish they had taken the opportunity to actually make it a little more interesting around the history of this, what that happened. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are going to this movie that aren't really familiar with that time frame in general. I think we remember it, but there's a whole demographic at this point that was like, not really aware of these things.
I remember it vaguely. I remember it more from all the work we did on it for the 1990 show. Davey, do you have a rebuttal on me and J Money's complaints about the plot?
No, I mean, I don't know. I thought by the end, it paid off. Because I was ambivalent about it, but I was satisfied with the ending, and it made me okay. But I had questions all the way up until the end, I'd say.
So this has been obviously our discussion with Atomic Blonde. Our next current feature that we're going to talk about is going to be at the end of the month, Thursday, August 31st, exactly 4 weeks from today. We're going to talk about the film Gotti, directed by Entourage actor Kevin Connolly and starring John Travolta himself as the Teflon Don. The movie opens the weekend before, and we're talking about it Thursday, August 31st. But before then, in just 3 days, Sunday, August 6th, it's time for Indie Spotlight. And It's going to be 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, and we're going to be spotlighting indies from 2012, as we've been doing all year. And this time it's going to be a film called The Sound of My Voice from 2012, and that's coming this Sunday, August the 6th, so we will see you then.